At my brother's promotion, he mocked me. My sister, no degree, no future, lives off us. All laughed, even our parents. I smiled, lifted my glass. Cheers, you won't see me again. I left. Silence. I finished my champagne in one gulp and placed the glass on the table so quietly that no one heard. There were at least 30 people around me, Ethan's colleagues, our relatives, neighbors, even a few of my father's clients from the car dealership. They had all just laughed at my brother's joke, a joke about me. "This is my sister," Ethan said, putting his arm around my shoulders as if we were best friends. No degree, no future, just living off her family. The room erupted in laughter. Even Mom, even Dad. Clarissa covered her mouth with her hand, but her eyes were laughing. Roger applauded, holding a glass of whiskey in his hand. Ethan beamed as if he had just told the best joke of his life. I smiled. I raised my empty glass. "Cheers," I said calmly. "This is the last time any of you will ever see me." Then I turned and walked to the exit. Behind me, there was such silence that I could hear my shoes rustling on the parquet floor. No one stopped me. No one called out. I reached the door, took my jacket from the coat rack, and stepped out into the cold November evening. It all started 3 years ago. I had just finished school and dreamed of becoming a doctor. I didn't just dream. I knew I would become a surgeon. I knew it from the moment I was 9 years old and saw doctors saving my grandfather's life after a heart attack. I wanted to be the person who brought people back from the other side. I got into medical school on my second try. My dad said it was a waste of money, but he signed the papers anyway. My mom added, "I hope you understand the sacrifice we are making." The first year was hell. Anatomy, biochemistry, physiology. I studied until 2 in the morning, fell asleep over my textbooks, woke up at 6 in the morning to review the material before class. My grades weren't bad, but they weren't perfect, and my parents expected perfection. "We're paying for your education," my mom would say at breakfast every time I asked for money for transportation or lunch. "The least you can do is study hard." "And maybe get a part-time job," my dad would add, flipping through the newspaper. "Ethan was already earning his own money at your age." Ethan. Always Ethan. My older brother who did everything right. He graduated from technical college, immediately got a job as an assistant engineer in construction, became an engineer 2 years later, and a project manager 3 years after that. He bought a car, rented an apartment, and introduced his girlfriend Leslie to his parents. I was still living at home, eating their food and asking for money for textbooks. In my sophomore year, my mom started calculating out loud how much I was costing them. These weren't serious conversations, just comments at dinner, jokes while cleaning. "Julia, did you eat all the cheese? That was $8. Maybe you could get a job as a waitress on the weekends. At least you'd be bringing something home." "Roger, look, she bought a new notebook again. How much can you write in there?" At first, I thought it was really a joke. But the jokes repeated every day, every morning, every evening, until I started to feel guilty for every piece of bread, every cup of coffee. I remember one evening particularly clearly. I was preparing for a pathological anatomy exam, sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of handouts. Mom was making dinner, Dad was watching the news. A normal Saturday. "Julie, come here," Mom called. I got up and walked over to the stove. She was stirring something in a pot, not looking at me. "You know, Ethan called today. He said he's getting a raise. His salary will go up by $300. "That's great," I replied. "He's been working for 3 years now. He's independent. He's not a burden to anyone." I said nothing. Mom finally looked at me. "When are you going to start bringing money into the house? You're 21 now. Being a student is no excuse for living off your parents." "I'm trying to study hard," I said quietly. "Trying isn't enough. You have to think about your family, too." Dad called from the living room. "Clarissa, leave the child alone." But his voice was indifferent, automatic. At the beginning of my 3rd year, I got a job as a waitress in a small cafe near the university. The owner, a woman in her 50s named Doreen, hired me without any experience after a 5-minute conversation. Can you carry a tray? Yes. Aren't you afraid of hard work? No. Then come in tomorrow at 10. The schedule was grueling, from 11 in the morning to 8 in the evening, 5 days a week. I managed to make it to my morning lectures, but after work I didn't have the energy to open my textbook. My legs were aching, my back was sore, and my hands were shaking from exhaustion. See? It works out, my mother said when I brought home my first $400. Now you can pay for yourself. But paying for myself turned out to be impossible. Work took up all my time, my grades slipped, and my teachers wouldn't accept my work. The dean called me into his office after I failed 2 exams in a row. "Julia, you understand that you can't go on like this, right?" he asked, looking at me over his glasses. "Medicine requires your full commitment." "I understand. It's just, I need to work." "Then maybe you should take a leave of absence. Come back when you're ready." I knew I wouldn't be coming back. I knew that academic leave was a polite way of saying, "You failed." I came home with the withdrawal papers and gave them to my mom. She was sitting at the computer, checking some bills. Even in retirement, she sometimes helped former clients with their tax returns. "Well," she said without even looking surprised, "at least now you'll be useful." Dad said nothing. Ethan, who had just come over for dinner with Leslie, patted me on the shoulder. "Not everyone is cut out for it, sis. The main thing is to find your place." My place was the coffee shop. I continued to work there, bringing part of my salary home. For utilities, as Mom said. I put the rest in an old box under my bed. I didn't know why. I just saved it. In a year, I had accumulated almost $2,000. The party in honor of Ethan's promotion was supposed to be a celebration. He became the chief engineer of a large construction project, and my parents decided to throw a party at our house. My mom cooked for 3 days. My dad bought expensive cognac. Leslie arrived in a new dress with her hair done at the salon. I came after my shift at the coffee shop and didn't have time to change into something festive. My mother met me in the hallway with a slightly irritated expression. "You could at least comb your hair. Etan's colleagues will see what kind of family we have." I said nothing. I changed into a simple black dress, tied my hair back in a ponytail, and went out to the guests. All evening, I held a glass of champagne in my hand and answered polite questions about what I did. "I work in a coffee shop," I said. "Oh, how nice. Are you studying?" "No." "I see. Well, work is work." Then Ethan made a toast. He thanked his parents for their support, Leslie for her love, and his colleagues for their trust. Then he looked around the room, his gaze resting on me, and I saw the corners of his lips turn up. He came over and put his arm around my shoulders. "And this is my sister. I've already told you the rest." When I left the house, my legs carried me to the bus stop. I got on the bus and rode to Violet's apartment. She opened the door in her bathrobe, a chocolate bar in her hand. "What happened?" she asked when she saw my face. "Can I stay the night?" "Come in." Violet didn't ask any unnecessary questions. We had been working together for a year, sometimes exchanging a few words during breaks, but we weren't close friends, just acquaintances from work. But that evening, she made up a bed for me on the sofa, made some tea, and said, "You can live here until you sort things out." I lay down on the cot at 2 in the morning and took out my phone. 32 missed calls from my mom, 15 from my dad, 8 from Ethan. No messages with apologies, just, "Where are you? Call me immediately. Don't do anything stupid." The last message from Ethan came at 1:37 a.m. "You're going too far. We're family." I blocked my mom's number. I clicked on my dad's name and blocked him. Then Ethan. I deleted my brother's unread message without opening it. I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the floor. Cars were noisy outside the window. A neighbor's TV was playing somewhere in the distance, and I was lying in a strange apartment thinking that for the first time in 3 years, I felt something like relief. It was as if I had taken off a backpack that I had been carrying for so long that I had forgotten what it was like to walk without it. Violet brought me a pillow and laid out a blanket. Sleep, she said. "We'll figure it out tomorrow." But I didn't sleep until morning. On my first morning at Violet's, I woke up to the smell of coffee. The sun was shining through the thin curtains, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then my memory returned. The party, Ethan, my promise, the blocked numbers. "Coffee's ready," Violet called from the kitchen, "and toast." I'm not promising anything else. I got up, folded the blanket, and went out to her. Violet was sitting at a small table by the window, eating toast with peanut butter and scrolling through her phone. "Thanks," I said. "You're welcome. Just a heads up. I don't like long conversations about feelings. If you need to cry, go to the bathroom. If you need to scream, go outside." I smiled. That was exactly what I needed. No sympathy, no questions. "Got it. Good. Your shift starts at 11, don't forget." We arrived at work together. Doran met us at the entrance, as usual, with a cigarette in her hand. "Julie, you look terrible," she said instead of saying hello. "Bad night." "Well, I hope you'll work better today than you look." I nodded and went inside. Violet looked at me with a slight smile. She's always like that. Don't pay any attention to her. That week was strange. I worked as usual, carried orders, smiled at customers, cleaned tables after my shift. But something had changed. I didn't feel the oppressive burden I had been carrying for the last 3 years. No calls from my mom asking when I was coming home. No comments from my dad about how I forgot to buy milk again. No Ethan with his condescending advice. In the evening, Violet and I sat in her apartment, ate Chinese takeout, and watched some TV series. She didn't ask why I didn't call my parents. She didn't advise me to make up with them. She just gave me a place where I could breathe. "By the way, are you settled in okay?" she asked on the third day. "Is the fold-out bed comfortable?" "Quite." "Okay, just let me know if you need anything. I'm not a saint, but until you find something of your own, you can stay here." "Thank you, Violet." She waved her hand as if shooing away an insect. "No need. Just pay your share for food and don't litter in the bathroom." On the 7th day, as I was wiping the tables after lunch, my mom and dad walked into the cafe. I saw them through the large window before they came in. My heart sank, but I didn't back down. I just kept wiping the table as if they weren't there. My mom approached first. She was wearing her favorite beige jacket, her hair pulled back in a bun. My dad stood behind her, his hands in his pockets, a worried look on his face. "Julia," my mom began in the tone she usually used with children, "we need to talk." "I'm working," I replied without looking up. "This is important." I finally looked at her. Her face was tired but firm. I had seen that expression 1,000 times before, when she had made up her mind and wasn't going to change it. "Okay, I'll be done in 2 minutes and then I'll come out." They sat down at a table by the window. I finished my work, took off my apron, and went out to them. I sat down opposite them, folding my hands in my lap. "Well?" I asked. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat, but Mom spoke anyway. "Julia, we understand that you're upset about Ethan. He didn't mean to hurt you, he was just joking." "Uh-huh. But that's no reason to run away from home and hide. You're growing up. You have to learn not to take everything so personally." I was silent. I waited to see what would happen next. "We talked it over and decided to find you a decent job," Mom continued. "Dad has a friend who's looking for an office assistant. It's a decent salary, stable work, and you'll contribute to our utility bills. Let's say $300 a month. It's fair, considering we've supported you your whole life." I slowly shifted my gaze from my mother to my father. He nodded, as if confirming her words. $300, I repeated. "Yes. It's not that much, when you think about it. We pay for the house, for food, for everything." "I don't live with you anymore," I reminded them. "Don't make up stories," my mom replied sharply. "You spent a week at a friend's house, but that can't last forever. You'll come home, find a job, and everything will be fine." I looked at my dad. He avoided my gaze, looking at something outside the window. "Dad," I said quietly, "do you think so too?" He finally looked at me. I saw nothing but fatigue in his eyes. "Julie, your mom is right. You have to be responsible. We're not rolling in money either. We took out a loan for renovations and we're helping Ethan. It would be fair if you contributed too." "You're helping Ethan?" I asked. "He got a raise. He makes more than both of you combined." Mom frowned. "That's none of your business. He's our son. We have the right to support him." "And who am I?" "You're our child too. But you have to understand that we can't support you forever. At least Ethan is trying. You dropped out of college, you work as a waitress, and you live off someone else." Something inside me clicked, like a switch. I stood up. "No," I said. Mom raised her eyebrows. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not coming back. I'm not going to chip in for any utilities. And I'm not going to work in your friend's office." "Julia, don't be a child," Mom started, but I cut her off. "I'm not a child, and I'm not your problem. Anymore." Dad finally intervened. "Julie, think about what you're saying. We're your parents. You can't go anywhere without us." I smiled, not an angry smile, not a condescending smile, just a smile. "We'll see." My mother opened her mouth to say something, but I was already walking toward the door. Violet stood behind the counter, watching the whole scene. When I walked past her, she asked quietly, "Is everything okay?" "Yes." I spent the rest of my shift in a strange fog. My hands did their work automatically, pouring coffee, serving plates, ringing up checks, and one thought kept running through my head. They didn't come because they missed me. They needed money. In the evening, when Violet and I returned home, I sat down on the sofa bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Violet was cooking something in the kitchen, not disturbing me, but then she came out with 2 cups of tea and sat down next to me. "Do you want to talk?" "I don't know." "Then just listen," she said. "I don't know your whole story, but I know one thing. The people who really need you don't come to you with bills." I nodded. Tears welled up in my throat, but I held them back. Over the next few days, I thought about what to do next. Work as a waitress for the rest of my life? It's stable, but it leads nowhere. Go back to medicine? I don't have the money for school. Find some other job? What skills do I have besides carrying trays? The answer came unexpectedly. I was serving a table where 2 men in formal suits were sitting. They were talking about work, paying no attention to me. "We ordered that sandwich catering again for the meeting," said one. And again, everything was cold and tasteless. "I don't understand why it's so hard to find decent food delivery for the office," replied the other. "We're willing to pay, but everything on the market is either expensive or terrible. We need to find someone who cooks at home and delivers fresh food. My wife cooks better than a restaurant, but she's not going to cook for 15 people every day." I brought them coffee and returned to the counter, but their words stuck in my head. Home-cooked food delivery for offices. I know how to cook. My mom taught me when I was a kid, and in my first year of medical school, I often cooked for the whole dorm. Why not give it a try? That evening, I told Violet about the idea. She listened, chewing pizza, and nodded from time to time. "It's risky," she said when I finished. "You have no business experience, no customers, not even a proper kitchen." "I know. But I've seen you cook, and it's really good. Maybe it will work." "Maybe," I repeated. I thought about it for a week. I counted my money, made a plan, and looked for information about registering a business. I had $2,000. That would be enough to get started if I was careful with my spending. 2 weeks after talking to my parents, I went to Doreen and told her I was quitting. "Why?" she asked, taking a drag on her cigarette. "I want to try something of my own." She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "Okay, but if it doesn't work out, you can always come back. You're a good waitress." "Thank you." That same evening, I sat at Violet's laptop and filled out the forms to register a micro-business. Violet stood behind me, looking skeptically at the screen. "Are you sure?" she asked. "What if it doesn't work out?" I turned around and smiled. "Then at least I'll have tried." Violet sighed but smiled back. "All right, then I'll be your first investor. Here's $100 for groceries. Just don't mess it up." She placed a crumpled bill on the table. I took it and felt something warm spread through my chest. It wasn't the money. It was the fact that someone believed in me for the first time in a very long time. I clicked the submit application button and leaned back in my chair. Scary? Yes. But I had already made my decision. For the first 3 months, I slept 4 hours a day. I woke up at 5 in the morning, went to Violet's kitchen, and cooked. At first, it was 5 orders a week. 3 offices that I found through Doreen's acquaintances. They ordered lunches for Tuesday and Thursday. Sandwiches, salads, sometimes soup in thermoses. I packed everything in disposable containers, labeled each one, put them in a cooler bag, and took the bus. The first office was 20 minutes away from us. The second was another 15 minutes away, and the third was on the other side of town. When I got home, I collapsed on the sofa bed and slept until lunchtime. Then I cooked again for the next day. Violet helped as much as she could. She packed the containers while I chopped vegetables. She took photos of the dishes for social media. She even came up with a name, Julene Steele. Simple. No frills. People need to know who's cooking, she explained. Personalization sells. I didn't understand half of what she was saying about marketing, but I trusted her. Violet turned out to be much smarter than I thought. She created a page on social media, posted photos every day and responded to messages, and I just cooked. The first big customer appeared a month later, a small IT company with 15 employees. Their office manager, a woman named Tricia, wrote to Violet in a direct message. "I saw your sandwiches. Can you make lunches for 15 people every day? The budget is $200 a day." $200. Every day. I reread the message 3 times before I believed it. "Say yes," Violet said, standing behind me. "I'm not sure I can do it." "You can do it. Go ahead and write it." I wrote it. Tricia replied in 5 minutes. "Great, we'll start on Monday." That Monday, I was cooking from 3 in the morning. 15 servings of chicken with vegetables, 15 salads, 15 desserts. My hands were shaking as I packed everything into bags. Violet helped me carry them to the bus. "You're great," she said as we parted. "Everything will be fine." Everything was fine. Tricia met me at the office, helped me carry the boxes, and laid everything out on the kitchen table. An hour later, she wrote, "Everyone loved it. See you tomorrow." After that, orders poured in, one after another. Tricia's friends from other companies, their acquaintances, colleagues. 2 months later, I was already cooking for 8 offices. Violet's kitchen could no longer hold everything I needed. I bought a second refrigerator and put it in the living room. I bought another stove, a small tabletop one. "Julie, this is impossible," Violet said, stumbling over boxes of containers. "You need a proper space." I knew she was right, but I was afraid to take that step. Renting a commercial kitchen is expensive. What if the customers suddenly disappeared? What if everything fell apart? But the customers didn't disappear. On the contrary, there were more and more of them. After 3 months, I calculated my monthly income, $8,000, minus food, minus transportation, minus taxes. I was left with $5,500, more than I had ever earned before. I hired an assistant, a girl named Rebecca, 22 years old, a culinary college student. She came every morning at 6 and helped with the cooking. She was short, thin, with light brown hair tied back in a ponytail. She didn't talk much, but she worked fast. "You're a good cook," she said after the first week. "Why don't you open a restaurant?" "It's too much for now," I replied. But the idea stuck in my head. Maybe someday. 5 months later, I found a small commercial kitchen on the outskirts of town. The owner, an elderly man named Carl, rented it out for $600 a month. The space was small, 2 stoves, 1 large refrigerator, work tables. But it was mine. On my first day in the new kitchen, I felt like I had opened a restaurant. Rebecca came with flowers, a small bouquet of daisies. "Congratulations on your new place," she smiled. Violet came too. She brought a bottle of cheap champagne. "Here's to you," she said, opening the bottle. "You did it, Julie." The 3 of us drank straight from the bottle, standing in that small kitchen. And I felt that for the first time in my life, I was doing something right. My income continued to grow. 6 months after opening the business, I was earning $20,000 a month. Minus the kitchen rent, Rebecca's salary, groceries, and taxes, I had $12,000 left. I opened a bank account and started saving, and I moved. A small one-room apartment on the second floor of an old building. No furniture, with an old stove and cracked tiles in the bathroom. But it was mine. I paid the first and last month's rent, signed the contract, and stood in the middle of the empty room, feeling something expand in my chest. Violet helped me move. We transported my belongings in one trip, 2 backpacks and a box of kitchen utensils. "Is that all?" she asked in surprise. "That's all," I confirmed. She hugged me goodbye. "Come visit whenever you want." "And thank you for not completely destroying my kitchen." I laughed. "Thank you for not kicking me out earlier." The first night in my new apartment, I slept on the floor, wrapped in a blanket. There was no bed, no table, not even any chairs, but I slept better than I ever had. The next morning, as I was packing orders in the kitchen, there was a knock at the door. Rebecca opened it and Ethan appeared on the threshold. I hadn't seen him in 6 months. He looked worse than I remembered. His face was gaunt. He had dark circles under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. He stood there, shifting from foot to foot, looking at me as if he didn't know where to start. "Hi, Julia," he said finally. "Hi," I replied, continuing to pack the salad. "Can I talk to you?" I looked at Rebecca. She nodded and went outside, leaving us alone. "About what?" I asked, closing the container. Ethan sighed. He came closer and leaned on the work table. "I know we haven't talked since that party. And I understand why. I was an idiot, Julie. Really. I had no right to say that." I waited. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He just acknowledged the fact. "I need your help," he continued. "What kind of help?" "Money. $10,000. I'll pay you back in 3 months, I promise." "I'm just in a tough spot right now." I slowly dried my hands with a towel and turned to him. "What kind of spot?" "I have a business idea, a startup, a mobile app for builders. Investors are willing to put money in, but I need seed money to make a prototype. 10,000 is all I need." "And you came to me." "You're my sister," he said, as if that explained everything. I smiled, not warmly, not coldly, just smiled. "Ethan, do you remember what you said at your party?" He looked away. "I already said I was an idiot. You said I had no degree, no future, just living off my family." "Julie, why would you want money from someone with no future?" He pressed his lips together. He was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I knew you would refuse." "Then why did you come?" "Because my parents told me to try." I nodded. Of course. Parents. "Go, Ethan, I have work to do." He stood there for a moment, then turned and left. Rebecca came back a few minutes later. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Everything's fine." But the next day, my parents showed up at the kitchen, Mom and Dad. They were waiting outside when I arrived with the morning orders. "Julia," Mom called. I stopped, holding boxes of containers in my hands. Rebecca took them from me and went inside. "What do you want?" I asked. "Ethan told us that you turned him down," Mom began without greeting me. "We came to ask you to reconsider." I looked at Dad. He stood silently, his hands in his pockets, his face tired. "No." "Julia, don't be selfish," Mom said sharply. "He's your brother. He has problems and needs help." "What problems?" Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Dad finally spoke up. "He's in debt. He took out a loan for that app, but the investors backed out. Now he owes the bank $20,000. If he doesn't pay it back in 2 months, he'll lose his apartment." I nodded slowly. "And you want me to give him 10,000? "We'll give it to him," Mom said. "We'll all give it to him together. We just don't have that kind of money right now." "But I do." "Yes. We know your business is doing well. Ethan saw your social media." I laughed. I couldn't help myself. "That's incredible," I said. 6 months ago, you said I was worthless, and now you're here asking me for money." "We never said you were worthless," Mom protested. "No, of course not. You just said I was a burden, that I had no future, that I was worthless." Dad stepped forward. "Julie, be reasonable. We're family. We have to help each other." I looked at him, at his tired face, his hands in his pockets, his eyes begging for something he couldn't say out loud. "No," I repeated. "I won't give you any money." "Ethan is a grown man. Let him deal with his own problems." Mom turned pale. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. After everything we've done for you?" "After everything you've done," I repeated. "I don't owe you anything." I walked past them and into the kitchen. I closed the door and listened. My mother was shouting something behind the door, but her words were muffled. Then silence. Then the sound of footsteps receding. Rebecca stood by the stove, pretending not to hear anything. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I'm fine." But my hands were shaking as I tried to chop the vegetables. I put down the knife, sat down on a chair, and covered my face with my hands. I didn't cry. I just sat there. A week later, I was served with a lawsuit. The courier came to the kitchen at 2 p.m. while I was preparing orders for the evening. He handed me an envelope and asked me to sign for it. I opened the envelope right there in the kitchen. Rebecca looked at me with concern. The document was official. A lawsuit from Clarissa and Roger Winston against Julia Winston. The demand, $100,000 as compensation for maintenance during her education and living at home. The list of expenses, food, utilities, education, clothing, transportation, everything was broken down by year, by month, by dollar. I read the document twice, 3 times. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. Rebecca came closer. "What is it?" I looked up at her. "My parents are suing me." Violet recommended a lawyer. She knew him through her ex-boyfriend, who had once sued for alimony, Marcus Delaney. 41 years old, short, with gray hair at the temples and tired eyes. His office was on the 3rd floor of an old building in the city center. 2 small rooms, a retired secretary, and the smell of coffee. I came to see him 2 days after receiving the lawsuit. He read the document slowly, occasionally underlining something with a pencil. "This is absurd," he said finally, putting the papers down. "But that doesn't mean your parents won't try to prove their case." "Can they win?" I asked. "Unlikely. Parents have no legal right to claim compensation for child support if there was no written agreement on the debt. And in your case, as I understand it, there was no such agreement." "No, of course not." "Then their position is weak, but they may try to prove that you agreed verbally to return the money. They'll bring in witnesses, make up a story. Court isn't just about facts, it's also about emotions." He paused and poured himself some coffee from a thermos. "The case will cost you $3,000, maybe more if the process drags on. If you're willing to pay, I'll take it on." I nodded. "I'm ready." The next 2 months were hell. Marcus prepared documents and gathered evidence that I had no agreements with my parents. I provided him with bank statements, receipts for apartment rent, and proof that I earned my own income. He talked to me for 2 hours every week, asked questions, and prepared me for court. "They'll try to throw you off balance," he warned. "They'll bring up the past, talk about family obligations, make you feel guilty. Your job is to stay calm." I tried, but I couldn't sleep at night. I lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and ran through all the possible scenarios in my head. What if they win? What if the court decides that I really owe them money? The business continued to operate. Rebecca took on most of the work while I ran around to lawyers and courts. Violet came in the evenings, brought food, sat next to me, and didn't ask any unnecessary questions. "You can do this," she said. "You're stronger than you think." The court hearing was scheduled for early February. I arrived at the courthouse at 9 a.m. with Marcus. My parents were already sitting on a bench on the other side of the room, my mother in a dark suit, my father in a formal jacket. Next to them was their lawyer, a man in his 50s with a round face and a confident smile. When I sat down, my mother looked at me. Her face was stony. Dad looked away. The judge, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair, began the hearing. My parents' lawyer spoke first. He talked about how Clarissa and Roger sacrificed themselves for their children, how they paid for Julia's education, fed her, clothed her, and gave her a roof over her head. How, instead of gratitude, she had dropped out of school, left home, and refused to help her family in difficult times. "Mrs. Winston," he said to her mother, "please tell us how you felt when your daughter left home after an innocent joke at a family celebration." Mom wiped away a tear that wasn't there. "I was devastated. We loved Julia. We always have. But she took her brother's words too seriously. We tried to talk to her, but she refused to listen. And when you asked her for financial help, she refused that too?" "Yes, even though we spent tens of thousands of dollars on her." The lawyer nodded and called the witnesses. The first was my mother's cousin, a woman in her 40s whom I saw at family gatherings once a year. She told how Clarissa always complained that Julia didn't appreciate her family. Then they called my parents' neighbor, who confirmed that he had seen me living at home until I was 23 and not paying anything. Marcus listened calmly, writing something down in his notebook. When it was our turn, he asked the judge to provide evidence that my parents and I had a written agreement to return the money. "There isn't one," admitted my parents' lawyer, "but a verbal agreement is also valid." "Only if there is evidence of such an agreement," Marcus replied calmly. "Witnesses, recordings of conversations, correspondence. Do you have any of these?" The lawyer paused. "Family relationships imply mutual support." "Family relationships do not imply a legal obligation to repay money for food and accommodation if the child was a minor at the time of the expenses," Marcus replied. "My client lived with her parents until she was 23, but most of the expenses were incurred when she was a minor or a student. The parents have no right to demand compensation for this." The judge listened to both sides. Then she asked me to testify. I approached the podium, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. "Ms. Winston," the judge addressed me, "why did you leave home?" I took a deep breath. "Because I was publicly humiliated. My brother said that I had no diploma, no future, that I was living off my family. Everyone laughed, including my parents. I decided I didn't want to be a part of that anymore." "Did you agree with your parents to pay them back for your living expenses?" "No, never. They never said I had to pay them back." "But they asked you for financial help?" "Yes. 6 months after I left home, they asked for $10,000 for my brother. I refused. The next day, they filed a lawsuit. The judge nodded and let me go. The decision was announced 2 weeks later. The court dismissed my parents' lawsuit due to lack of evidence of a written agreement regarding the debt. I won. Marcus shook my hand after the verdict was announced. "Congratulations. It was an easy case, but well done." I thanked him and left the courtroom. My parents had already left. I stood on the steps, looked at the gray February day, and felt emptiness instead of relief. The next week, the calls started. First from my cousin, who asked if it was true that I had refused to help my parents. Then from my aunt on my father's side, who said that I had disgraced the family. Then from my mother's friends, my father's colleagues, and neighbors. Violet showed me the messages on social media. My mother wrote a long post about how she gave everything for her children, and one of them turned her back on the family at the most difficult moment. She didn't mention my name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. "Don't read it," Violet said, taking my phone away. "It's manipulation. They're trying to make you feel guilty." But the messages kept coming. Relatives I hadn't seen in years suddenly remembered me and wrote to express their disappointment. Several clients canceled their orders, saying they didn't want to deal with people like that. The only one who supported me was Aunt Meredith, my mother's sister. She called a week after the trial. "Julie," she said, "I always knew Clarissa was tough, but I didn't know she was that tough. Don't pay attention to what she says. You did the right thing." "Thank you, Auntie. If you need anything, call me. I'm here." But her support wasn't enough to drown out the chorus of condemnation. I started avoiding social media, turned off my phone, and didn't respond to messages. I focused on work. I cooked, delivered orders, slept 5 hours a day. Rebecca noticed that something was wrong. "You look tired," she said one morning. "Everything's fine." "Julie, don't lie. What happened?" I sighed and told her about the message, about how my parents had started a campaign against me. Rebecca listened silently, then put her hand on my shoulder. "People will believe what they want to believe, but those who really know you won't believe these lies." I wanted to believe her, but every day it became more difficult. Everything changed on the evening of March 2nd. I came home around 8, tired after a long day. I climbed the stairs, unlocked the door, and went inside. The apartment was trashed. The table was overturned, things were scattered everywhere, and the mirror in the hallway was broken. Books, clothes, and dishes were scattered on the floor. The pillows were torn open, feathers spilling out. I froze in the doorway, not understanding what I was seeing. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. The first thing I did was check the windows. They were closed. The door wasn't broken. Someone had entered with a key or unlocked the lock. The second thing I did was call the police. They arrived in 20 minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman, inspected the apartment and asked a few questions. "Was anything stolen?" the man asked. I looked around. My laptop was there. My phone was in my pocket. I kept my money in the bank and didn't have any jewelry. No, nothing was stolen. Who could have done this? I don't know. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to harm you? I paused. I thought about my parents, about what they were capable of doing, but I said, no, I don't know. The police filed a report and left, promising to look into it. But I knew that without witnesses and cameras, the case would go nowhere. I started cleaning up. I put away books, gathered clothes, swept up the broken mirror. I didn't feel like crying, only anger, cold and hard. And then I saw it. Near the sofa, under an overturned chair, was a broken heel. Tall, thin, beige. I picked it up and looked at it. On the sole was a small logo of a brand I knew well. My mother wore shoes like these. I had seen them on her hundreds of times. I stood in the middle of the trashed apartment, holding the heel in my hand, and felt something inside me break. Not from pain, from the realization of how low they were willing to sink. I put the heel in my pocket, took out my phone, and texted Violet. "I need your laptop, urgently." She arrived in half an hour. She saw the destruction and turned pale. "Who did this?" "It doesn't matter. I need to find an address." I found my parents' address in some old letters. At 9 o'clock in the evening, I was standing on the doorstep of their house. Violet was waiting in the car. She insisted on coming with me. I pressed the doorbell. I waited. I heard footsteps behind the door. The door opened, and my mother appeared on the threshold. She saw me, and fear flashed across her face for a moment. Quick, almost imperceptible. But I saw it. "Julia," she said, "what are you doing here?" I took the heel out of my pocket and placed it in her palm. "You have 2 days," I said calmly. $50,000. Compensation for the destroyed apartment. Otherwise, I'm going to the police with this." Mom looked at the heel without answering. Dad appeared behind her. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just looked at Mom. She understood. 2 days, I repeated. Or the police. I turned and walked to the car. The money arrived the next day. $50,000 in my bank account, without any notification, without any explanation. Just a transfer from Roger Winston's account. I sat in a coffee shop near the bank, looking at the message on my phone, and felt nothing. No relief, no joy, no triumph, just emptiness. Violet sat across from me, drinking her coffee and waiting for me to say something. "They paid," I said finally. "Good," she replied curtly. I thought I would feel something else, like I had won, but I don't feel anything. Violet put her cup on the table and leaned toward me. "You did the right thing, Julie, but that doesn't mean it should be easy for you. You lost your family. It hurts, even if they were bad parents. I know. Give yourself time. Don't judge yourself for what you feel. I nodded. Violet always said the right things. Not sweet, not soothing, just right. For the next few months, I lived for my work. The orders kept coming in. I hired another assistant, a girl named Tessa, 20 years old, energetic and talkative. Together with Rebecca, they handled the cooking, while I took care of deliveries and new contracts. 4 months later, I opened a second location, a small kitchen on the other side of town, closer to the business centers. I hired 2 more people and bought additional equipment. The business grew faster than I expected. By summer, I was earning $30,000 a month. Violet joked that I would soon be a millionaire, but I knew it wasn't about the money. It was about doing something of my own for the first time in my life, something that no one could take away from me. I didn't think about my parents, or rather, I tried not to think about them. I blocked out memories when they came up. I worked until late, slept little, and filled every minute with work. Aunt Murdet wrote sometimes, briefly, without being intrusive. "How are you?" "Is everything okay?" I replied just as briefly, "Fine. Thank you." She didn't mention my parents, and I was grateful to her for that. In June, I ran into Ethan by chance. It happened at the supermarket near my apartment. I was buying groceries for the weekend, standing in line at the checkout, when I saw him in the next line. He had aged, or perhaps he was just tired. His face was gaunt with dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was unkempt. He was holding a basket with a few items, bread, milk, and ready-made meals in plastic containers. Our eyes met. He saw me, and something in his eyes flinched, but he didn't look away. He just stood there and stared. I approached him after checkout. He was waiting by the exit, as if he knew I would come. "Hi," I said. "Hi, Julie." We stood in silence for a few seconds. People with baskets and bags bustled around us. Soft music played from the speakers. "How are you?" I asked, though I didn't know why I was asking. "Fine. How are you?" "Fine, too." He nodded. He looked away. "I heard you're doing well in business. You're expanding your business." "Yes. That's good. I'm happy for you." I didn't answer. I waited to see what would happen next. "Mom and Dad aren't the same anymore," he said quietly. "Dad is sick. His heart. The doctors say he needs surgery, but he refuses. Mom doesn't look well either. She's aged." I felt something tighten in my chest, a pang of guilt, sharp and unexpected. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Ethan looked at me. "They didn't ask me to talk to you. I just thought you should know." "Thank you." He nodded and picked up his grocery bag. "Bye, Julie." "Bye." I watched him walk toward the exit and felt my hands tremble. Not from anger, from something else, from the realization that everything is finite. My parents are getting older, Ethan is living his life, and I am living mine. And we will never be the family we could have been. That evening, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, drinking tea and looking out over the city. Violet called, but I didn't answer. I wanted to be alone. I thought about Dad, about his heart, about the fact that he might die, and I would never tell him what I wanted to say, that I missed him, even after everything. That part of me was still waiting for him to call and say, "I'm sorry." But he wouldn't call. Ever. The next morning, I woke up with a decision made. Not to go back, not to seek a meeting, not to let guilt control me. Dad made his choice. Mom made hers. Ethan made his. And I made mine. Work continued. Orders, deliveries, new customers. Rebecca suggested opening a third location, but I decided to wait. I didn't want to expand too quickly. I wanted to do everything right. In August, I celebrated my 25th birthday. I didn't want to celebrate, but Violet insisted. "You need a party," she said. "Stop hiding from life." She organized a small party at my apartment. She invited Rebecca, Tessa, Marcus Delaney, and a few regular customers who had become friends over time. 10 people, no more. A simple table, homemade food, cheap wine. I stood in the middle of the living room, looked at these people, and realized this is my family now. Not blood, but real. The ones who stayed when everyone else left. The ones who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Marcus raised his glass. To Julia, he said, for not giving up, to her being stronger than she seems, to her doing something real. Everyone drank, me too, and for the first time in many months, I felt something warm in my chest. Later, when the guests had left, I sat on the sofa and scrolled through my phone. I saw a message from Murdit. She sent a photo without a comment. The photo showed Mom, Dad, Ethan, and Leslie. They were sitting at the holiday table, smiling at the camera. Mom was holding a glass, Dad was hugging her shoulders, Ethan was saying something, Leslie was laughing, as if nothing had happened, as if everything was fine. I looked at the photo for a long time. I tried to feel something, anger, pain, sadness, but all I felt was distance. They were there, and I was here, and that was okay. I deleted the photo, but I didn't block Meredith. Maybe someday I'll be able to respond to her with more than thank you or okay. Maybe someday I'll be able to ask about my parents without feeling pain in my chest, but not now. Late at night, when the city was asleep, I went out onto the balcony. The air was warm, like summer. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing and people were laughing. I looked at the lights in the windows, at the stars above the rooftops, and thought about what had happened this year. I lost my family. I lost the people I grew up with, the people I loved, even when they hurt me. I lost the feeling that there was a home somewhere to return to. But I found something else. Myself, my place, my strength. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet without anyone's support. I learned to say no when I needed to. I learned not to feel guilty for choosing myself. Freedom cost me my family. That's a high price to pay. Sometimes at night I lie awake and wonder if it was worth it. Could I have done something differently? Is there a chance that we will ever reconcile? But in the morning, I wake up, make coffee, go to work, and realize I am living for myself for the first time in my life. I do what I want. I eat what I want. I sleep as much as I want. I am not accountable to anyone. I don't have to prove my worth to anyone. I don't know if I'll ever forgive my parents, if I'll ever see Ethan again, if my dad will call before he dies, if my mom will write an apology. I don't know, and that scares me. But I know one thing. It was my choice, and I take responsibility for it. Violet stepped out onto the balcony, wrapped in a blanket. She sat down next to me. "Are you awake?" she asked. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About everything." She nodded. She was silent for a few minutes. Then she said, "You know what I think? You're the bravest person I know. Because you left. Most people stay in toxic families their whole lives because they're afraid of being alone. But you weren't afraid." "I was afraid," I admitted. "Very much so. But you left anyway. That's what courage is." We sat in silence, looking at the city. Somewhere out there, on the other side, lived my parents. Somewhere out there was Ethan. Somewhere out there was the past I had run away from. But here, on this balcony, in this apartment, with this person next to me, this was my present, and it was mine. I took out my phone and opened the gallery. Among the photos of dishes and orders, there was one taken today. Violet had photographed me during the party when I wasn't looking. I'm standing at the table, holding a plate, smiling at someone off camera. The smile is real. My eyes are alive. I didn't recognize myself. This wasn't the girl who sat at her parents' kitchen table 3 years ago and felt guilty for every bite of bread she ate. This wasn't the girl who left her brother's party with an empty glass and a broken heart. This was a different person, stronger, freer, myself. I'll keep this photo so that on difficult days I can remind myself, I did it. I survived. I built a life from scratch, and if I did it once, I can do it again. My phone vibrated in my hand, a message from an unknown number. I opened it and my heart skipped a beat. "This is Ethan. Dad's in the hospital. He had surgery. If you want to come, he's in room 312. We'll be there tomorrow at noon. But if you don't want to, I understand." I read the message twice, 3 times. My hands were shaking. Violet looked at me. "What's up?" I showed her the screen. She read it and silently returned the phone. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly, and it was true. I didn't know. Part of me wanted to delete the message and forget about it. Part of me wanted to go to the hospital, see my dad, maybe hear the "I'm sorry" I had been waiting for. But most of me just wanted peace. I wanted to stop feeling pain every time I thought about my family. I wanted to live without that burden. I put my phone face down and looked at Violet. "I'll decide tomorrow. Right now, I just want to sit here, with you, look at the city, and not decide anything." She smiled. "Sounds like a plan." We sat until dawn, watching the sky slowly lighten, the city wake up. And I felt that everything would be okay. Not perfect, not magical, just okay. Because for the first time in my life, it was my choice. And whatever I decided tomorrow, it would be right. For me.